your name and your company in the chat. I always like to know who we've got here, and your land acknowledgement. And we will get started in just half a second because we have a lot of information to cover, and I want to make sure we get through all of it. One housekeeping, if you can put your name and those kinds of things in the chat, but all questions, if you can put those into the Q&A, that will keep us much cleaner. Because what we'll do is I'm going to go through a whole bunch of information, and then the last thing we'll do is go through all of the questions in the Q&A. And so if they're all there and I'm not going back and forth, that makes that a more expeditious process. Okay, so as I said, my name is Terry Ball. I am the grants manager for Californians for the Arts. I am also the executive director of a small theater. So I understand, although mine is live theater as opposed to a movie theater, I understand the incredible difficult life you've had over the last few years and are continuing to have. I run a 130-seat black box rental venue in Santa Barbara, California, which is where I'm coming to you today from the unceded lands of the Chumash. All right, as I mentioned, what we're going to do is there's a slide presentation that I'm going to go through. I am not going to read every page in the slide presentation. You will have access to the presentation afterwards, and I encourage you to read every single page. There's a tremendous amount of useful information and references, including pictures of every page of the application. All right, let's move on. As I said, I'm from Californians for the Arts, which is a advocacy group for the arts and creative economy throughout the state. We are very much supporters of both for-profit and nonprofit industries, and trying to get, in general, both government and the public to recognize the impact of the creative economy and what a huge impact our industry has. Just like with NATO, we exist on memberships and donations. So I would encourage you to consider supporting the advocacy groups. Next. All right, so what we're going to do is, as I said, please put your questions in the Q&A. We will put in, I'm putting some links and my email into the chat. If you leave here with nothing else, leave here with my email, so that if you have any questions after this, if you have any problems when you're applying, if you have problems as you're going through the review process, please email me and I will do everything that I can to help you. I have been involved with this program since it first began at the end of 2021. So the problem that you're having is probably one someone else has already had, and we can help you get through it. There is a link both in the chat, and you'll see here, to the actual Cal Venues Grant website. That is where you will go to apply. There are also FAQs there. Everything we're going to do today there will be links to on the Californians for the Arts website. You'll get an email saying that it's posted there. There's a recording of this webinar. There will be a copy of the slide deck, and also the Q&A from today. I will go through and answer all of them, even those that we answer verbally. I'll do a written answer for, and that will be posted. Okay. Next page. Couple of important things to remember. If you applied for the California Venues program in the first round, then you cannot apply again. For those of you with movie theaters, you probably didn't apply because your NAICS codes only became eligible in this new round. But it's very important, if you have already applied, do not apply again, even if you were declined or you don't know what happened with your application, because if you apply again, it will automatically get declined. We can, however, if you have an application that is still pending, email me and I can help you get access to get back into it, and to be able to see if there are issues with that original grant that might be able to be resolved. As you all probably know, the way this grant program works is there was a piece of legislation written that created the program. And they created it and put it under a state agency called Cal OSBA, which is basically the Small Business Administration for the state of California. Cal OSBA then contracts with Lindustry to oversee and administer the grant. Lindustry then reaches out to Californians for the Arts and some other organizations to help be a liaison with the industry. We're here to help promote, to do things like this webinar, and also to offer technical support during the process. I explain that for two reasons. One, so you know who all the players are. And number two, because this grant is something that was created by a piece of legislation, it is very specific in its eligibility requirements, and there is really no leeway around those eligibility requirements. The legislation not only prescribes the requirements, but it prescribes how Lindustry can verify those requirements. So I just want you to kind of understand. The application portal is open now, and it will close on January 31st. There is no giant rush to get your application in, because the applications will not be reviewed on a first come, first served basis. They will be reviewed based on the percentage of loss, starting obviously with the highest amount of loss. Those applications will be reviewed first. You do, however, want to make sure you get your application in by January 31st. Even if you have questions, even if there are things that you're uncertain about, one thing that is hard and fast is once that portal closes on January 31st, Lindustry cannot accept any more applications. So be sure you get your application started. Do not expect to see this money. Even those of us who are lucky enough to get funded, this money is not going to be coming out for a little while. They won't even begin reviewing all of the applications until after January 31st. And then because each application is individually reviewed, it takes a while to get through them. And then it takes a while to get the money. So don't expect to hear anything other than a quick confirmation email when you submit, and don't start budgeting overly optimistically that you'll have this money by February 15th. Okay, next. Did we just skip a page? Okay, so a rough overview of the program. As you know, it is intended to support eligible independent live events and venues. The grant award itself is the lesser of $250,000 or 20% of the applicant's gross earned revenue in California for the 2019 taxable year. So if your revenue somehow is different than what was on your tax form, what is on your tax form will be what your grant award would be based on. The other thing is, if you received a California relief grant, which was the first relief grant that California put out, started back in January of 2021. If you received one of those grants and they were lump grants of $5,000, $10,000, $15,000, that amount of that grant will be deducted from this grant award. So if your grant award in this case is $50,000 and you got a $10,000 California relief grant, then your award amount will be $40,000. It's a little confusing here because the grant award is based on your 2019 taxes. The prioritization is based on the percentage of loss in Q2, Q3, and Q4 of 2020 compared to Q2, Q3, and Q4 of 2019. So this is not based on your taxes. This, you will provide profit and loss statements for those quarters, and we'll talk about that. But that's what the prioritization of how grants are processed is based on, those 3 quarters. And also one of the eligibility requirements is that you show at least a 30% loss in gross earned revenue in those 3 quarters of 2020 compared to those 3 quarters of 2019. If we have anybody here who works on a fiscal year instead of a calendar year. For the award amount, you're looking at your taxes. So that's your fiscal year. Whatever was your 2019 tax year on your fiscal dates, that's what the award amount is going to be. However, when you're talking about your quarters, Q2, Q3, and Q4 of 2019 and 2020, there you're going to talk about calendar year, so that we're comparing apples to apples for people in terms of when the COVID impact was. Because this grant is specifically COVID relief. It is not about future productions, future projects. It's not about building something new. It is to restore expenses from the COVID pandemic. Let's go on to the next page. So we've really talked about the application process. There will be an immediate review. You'll get an immediate confirmation of yes, your grant has been, your application, I'm sorry, has been accepted, and you've been, chosen to move on. But then there will be an actual full review, and you'll hear from a reviewer, and they'll ask you probably some additional questions. So it is a two-stage. When you get that first confirmation when you apply that says you've submitted, understand that only means that your grant application has been submitted and accepted, not that you've been accepted for the grant. I don't want to give anybody false celebration. So for this grant, you have to have an eligible event that is taking place in an eligible venue. It is open to both the venue operators, owners, and it is also open to people who present events. So we have a list of eligibility requirements for the venue itself, and we have a list of eligibility requirements for the events themselves. So at your venue, you have to have a defined performance and audience space. There needs to be sound mixing equipment, a public address system, and a lighting rig. You need to engage at least one person doing at least two of these tasks. That person does not have to be full-time. It ultimately doesn't matter whether they are an employee or a volunteer, and it is no problem if it is the same person. But you have to have these things: a box office manager, security personnel, a stage manager, a promoter, a booker, a sound engineer. At least two of those have to be covered.
And Terry, can I, for us theaters?
Yes.
Mixing equipment, public address system, lighting rig. I know that's live venue kind of equipment, but we have that also technically, correct?
Yes, exact. Yeah. Yeah. And we're going to talk about some as we go through. My understanding is that pretty much everybody on here is probably a movie and or drive-in theater. And there are some of these definitions that particularly since we brought in movie theaters in this second round, and because we also, sports are also involved in this application. So in the mind of the legislation, a lighting rig, even the lights at an outdoor ball field, that is being considered a lighting rig. So yeah,
lights.
Yes, exactly. Don't self-eliminate yourself over some of this language. And I will fully admit, and we'll talk about this in a little more detail when we get to the events, there are some of this where it's going to feel a little bit like you're fitting a square peg into a round hole. But we'll talk about that. All right. So the other thing that is true is you can only receive one grant. If you own multiple different businesses and you are the owner, even though they file separate tax returns, the owner as applicant can only receive a single grant. So if you have three different businesses, you need to select one of the top three. It used to be that you could only select the top one. But you can still, there was some hope that that might be expanded, but that is not the case. You can only receive and apply for one entity. Next. Okay, so now we're going to talk about what you have to be in terms of the event. So there's a list of different types of corporations. The important thing to understand is you can't be a church and also government organizations. If you are part of the city or the county or a university or college, and you don't have your own standalone taxes that you file, but you're part of, the UC or something, then again, you are unfortunately not eligible. You have to have that individual 2019 tax form because so much of the grant is based on that. Okay, the other eligibility criteria, and the thing to remember about these eligibility criteria are you have to meet all of them. So just because you meet the NAICS code doesn't mean you have to meet the other thing. You don't have to meet the other things. And just because you meet all of the other things doesn't mean you don't have to also meet the NAICS code. And the elephant in the room, I know for many of you in this particular sector, the first two NAICS codes that refer to motion picture theaters and drive-in motion picture theaters, the two eligible codes here, I understand that those are codes that the IRS system does not accept. So I know this is a problem for many people. I apologize. Unfortunately, this was also a problem in the first round of legislation, and sadly, the legislators didn't learn their lesson. The unfortunate reality is, if you have, for example, 512130, which is the code that encompasses these two, if that's what's on your taxes, then you will not be eligible. We will talk about ways to fix that, but your NAICS code, as is listed on your 2019 and or 2020 taxes, has to exactly match one of the codes in this list. And there's a short list here. We're about to go to the second page. And there is no way around that. You will see there are a couple of the codes here, like 7139 that ends there. And so anything that starts with those 4 digits counts, because I know some people in this group have the amusement and recreation industries code. So in the case of where there's a 4-number code listed here, as long as you have those first 4, doesn't matter what the others are. Okay, so for those of you who are not familiar with NAICS codes, and then if we have any not-for-profits here, because many not-for-profits don't use a NAICS code on their taxes because it's not required, the NTE codes are what are listed here for nonprofits. And you want to go to GuideStar and look up your listing in GuideStar, and that will tell you what your NTEE code is. All right, so let's go to the next page, because the thing that can happen, even though you can't get around not having one of the exact codes, Lindustry has a system where you can amend your tax return. And I want to be really clear here. I'm not an accountant. I'm not telling you to amend your tax returns. I'm not even suggesting you amend your tax returns. I am telling you that if you and your tax professional decide that one of the eligible codes does in fact describe your business and you weren't able to use it because it did not work in the tax system, and yet there's one of the other codes that does describe your system, your business, there is a process by which you can amend your returns. There's some very specific steps, and we're going to go over those. And more importantly, those will be in here for you to review with your tax professional so you can make this decision. But you do not have to wait for the IRS to respond back to you. What you have to do is file the amended return following these specific steps. The other thing that you need to know is only one of your 2 federal tax returns has to have the eligible code. So you do not have to amend both 2019 and 2020, and you don't need to amend or change your state taxes. You only need to do one of your federal taxes. And then there are 3 ways here that you can amend your return. One is to get a stamped return, which is you prepare the amended return, you take it to an actual physical IRS office, and they stamp it as accepted. So that's one thing you can do. Eddie, can you go to the next? The other is you can, along with your amended return, you get a letter from your CPA. And there's very specific things in here that the letter needs to include. And then the other is if you have an amended tax return along with evidence of electronic filing. Those are you have to, your amended return has to meet one of those 3 things in terms of the proof that you provide to Lindustry. And some of these instructions were from before. Lindustry won't reach out to you and say, can you go back one? And because this process was originally designed when in the first round of the venues grant, when most everybody had already submitted their tax returns. So if you do this process before you apply, then you'll want to put into a single PDF the amended return and whatever your form of proof is here. Just put that into one big PDF. If you've already applied, or if you won't get your amended return finished until after you apply, then you will contact Lindustry afterwards with these instructions here, and they'll help you upload the new return. For not-for-profits, you can look at, as I said before, the NTE in GuideStar. And if for some reason you have an NTE in GuideStar that does not accurately reflect your organization and what you do, then that can be updated through GuideStar, just like you can amend a tax return if your NAICS code doesn't accurately reflect what you do. I'm sure there will be questions on this that we'll go over in Q&A, but let's go on so we can cover everything else first. Okay, so these are the rest of the definitions of a live event, which all of them are going to include that you have live performers who are paid. Don't panic, because the determination of the state in these eligibility is that for movie theaters, for those showing films, that the performers in the films, who are both live and paid, because you pay a licensing fee to show the film, they have made the determination that the answer is yes, you do in fact have paid performers. So this one is slightly confusing because there's 3 different sets of bullet points. You don't have to fulfill all 3 of the sets. You do have to fulfill everything in at least one of the sets. So the thing that is consistent in all of them, as I said, is your event has to take place in an eligible venue, or you have to be an eligible venue that, is showing, in your case, eligible product. And there has to be a charge for, it has to be in an eligible venue. Performers have to be paid, and there must be an entrance fee for the event. So if you're showing all free movies, unfortunately, you do not qualify. There is a slight difference. This first group at the top, and I'm pointing at my screen like you can see, is that 70% of the earned revenue has to come from your eligible events. So if you're doing something else besides showing films, then films has to be your events have to be your primary business. We can't have, I'm, serving food most of the year, but one night of the year we show a movie or have a live event and pay the performers. You're still not going to qualify because this has to be your primary business. So the way that they determine that in the first bullet is that 70% of the earned revenue has to come from these events. The second grouping here is slightly different in that here it says that you have to put your tickets on sale at least 30 days before the date of the event. Ultimately, you do not have to meet both of those things. You don't have to both have 70% of your money coming from, and that you put your tickets on sale no less than 30. But you have to be one of those two things, along with the things that everybody has to be. And the final one refers to sports. So if you are meeting these qualifications and you're a sports team, because that is one of the eligible categories, you cannot be a major league or professional sports team. I don't think we have anybody here on that, so we're going to move on. Now, there are a number of things that make you ineligible. Go through and read all of these. I'm not going to cover most of them. I'm going to cover a couple of big ones. One is that you have to generate at least 70% of your gross revenue in California. You have to be based in California, and at least 70% of your gross revenue has to be in California. The other one, which it's a little confusing that this is ineligible instead of eligible, so it makes the wording a little weird. But the important thing to know is you have to have at least a 30% loss from those 3 quarters in 2019 to those 3 quarters in 2020. Not the whole year, not all of 2019 and not all of 2020. But if you look at the second quarter, once COVID hit, from 2000 or the time in 2019 that compares to the portion of 2020 when COVID hit. Okay, read the rest of these. We're not going to. Again, keep moving. Eligible use of funds. As I mentioned before, this is not about future projects. This is about recovery from COVID. So there's a number of specific things that are listed here. Read all the way through them to make sure that these are expenses that you have. It is important. The only thing that you do need to keep in mind with this is you also cannot use for this expenses that have already been covered by another COVID relief program. So if you got SFOG or you got PPP, if there are expenses that you have allotted to those specific programs, you can't also allot these expenses to them. Okay, next. The important thing to remember is don't go buy yourself a car. These need to be expenses of your business and expenses about recovering from COVID. Now, there are a list of documents that you are going to provide during the application process. The first one of them is an application certification that's going to ask you a whole bunch of questions that you're attesting to and promising that you're answering honestly. That's related to a lot of the eligibility, the general eligibility questions. You go to the venue's website and you download this ahead of time, and you can sign it with a wet signature. You can do it digitally, and there are specific instructions coming up in the manual that you'll have about how to do those things. That's one. The next thing that you're going to have is all of the pages for your 2019 and 2020 federal and California tax returns. Not just the first page, but the entire thing. So you're going to have 4 different PDFs, one with each return. Again, if it's an amended return, then you want to provide that additional paperwork in there. Another thing that you need is a government issued ID, driver's license or passport. You're going to want to scan that. So you have a PDF that you can upload or a JPEG that you can upload. And with the driver's license, you want to have both the front and the back. The interim financial statements. What they mean by interim financial statements is a profit and loss statement. In this one, they want it prepared in a very specific way. They want you to go to 2019. And again, even if you're on a fiscal year, this is all about calendar year. So you want to make a profit and loss statement for Q2 and another one for Q3 and another one for Q4, and then put all three of those reports together in a single PDF, and that's your interim financial statement for 2019. Then you're going to do the same thing with the three individual reports in one PDF for 2020. If there is something unusual about your P&Ls that you think is going to cause someone concern or confusion, write a note and include it in the PDF. One of the things that's true here is, as I mentioned, a human being is going to go through all of this. You want to make that human being's life as easy as possible to understand your situation and to review your documents. You want them to be your friend. So when you're preparing these, make sure they're clear, make sure they make sense, and make sure they're legible. The next thing is you have to prove that you were in existence in the state of California as a business prior to June 1st of 2019. So there's a list of documents here. You don't have to give them all of them. You need one of them. Articles of incorporation, certificate of organization, a fictitious name registration, or a business license. So you need one of those documents. If you don't have one, if you're filed with the Secretary of State, which you have to be for this, you can go to the Secretary of State's website, search your business, and they will have a PDF of your originating document you filed with them. You can, in the history portion, you can download that. If you are a not-for-profit, you will also need to provide a copy of your IRS tax letter. And finally, they want you to provide a California Secretary of State filing evidence. Again, you can look yourself up in the Secretary of State website, which you want to do anyway, because if you're not in good standing on that website, they won't issue your grant award. So one of your preparatory steps is to go look yourself up and make sure you're in good standing with the Secretary of State, and get yourself in good standing if you're not. Next. This is now, keep going, Eddie. This is just telling you again about the application certification. So this is going to show you how to do it electronically. Next. They're going to show you how to do it by hand. Next. And these are all just pictures, examples of the documents that you're going to be asked to proceed. In case you have no idea what your tax return looks like, they've given you some handy pictures. So keep going. Keep going. There's that ID. You're going to copy both sides. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Next. Okay. I don't want you to get confused by this page because it makes it seem like you can just go look up and select what your next code should be. This is really just, this is the original NAICS website. So if you don't know what NAICS codes are and you're curious, this is where you can go and search and learn about them. But you cannot go here and find a code that you think fits you and fill that in. It has to be the code that is on your taxes. That one confuses a lot of people. Okay, next. And I think, I don't know if I've said this or not, but on your taxes, it's labeled as business code. So if you go to your taxes and you cannot find this mystery code, it's under business code. Okay, another tip is their system does not like info at and or other what look like generic, non-specific email addresses. So if perchance you use info at your company, then use a different email for this. And the email is extremely important, both the email and the phone that you provide. These are how Lindustry is going to communicate with you. Make sure it's a phone number and an email address that are monitored regularly and will be for the next few months. Next. This is just telling you, make the life easy for the reviewers and make sure your documents are legible. They're giving you very specific things about how you should prepare your documents. Read them. Next. Okay. One of the things about this grant program and all the state grant programs is they're going to ask you some questions that feel like an invasion of privacy. Unfortunately, we live in a world where we have to balance our personal concerns about privacy and protection, and the state has to worry about fraud. And we have all read the articles during these various relief programs about, the couple in wherever that has submitted 152 applications and got 40 million grants that they shouldn't have because they made up businesses. And the state is mandated, or Lindustry is mandated by the state, and Cal OSBA is mandated by the state to make sure that doesn't happen. And that means they have to take a number of steps to verify that who you say you are is who you really are. And it is uncomfortable. Nobody likes it. But as we all know, it's necessary. So there's a step in the application process that is run by a third-party vendor called Persona. And what that's going to do is verify that the ID you provided and the human being that is sitting in front of the computer submitting the application are the same thing. Next. And there's all kinds of instructions here on how to go through the process, and we will, but I just wanted to warn you. Read these best practices, because there are things that you can do to make it easier when it's trying to recognize you. For example, you see all of my clocks. When I tried to do the Persona the first time, it was certain that I had 16 people in the picture with me. So if you're in front of a more solid background, if it's well lit, so read these and it will make your life easier when you're doing the Persona step. Next. Okay, so these are the step-by-step how to complete Persona, because it's literally going to have you update, and then either on the camera on your computer, or you can use your cell phone. It's going to take pictures, and it's going to say, look to the right, look to the left, until it recognizes that those two things are the same. So when you're making your picture of your ID, make sure it's legible and clear. Next. This is just the rest of the steps, so you know what's coming. Next. There are a number of specific ways to set up your computer that will also help you not run into glitches with the application process. The first and foremost is to use Google Chrome. And then there's some steps in here that I highly recommend you read through and do, because it will cut down on potential tech issues. Keep going. So it's next, Eddie. It's going to tell you how to do these things, how to clear your cache, how to use incognito mode, and how to disable your pop-up blocker. So we can go through all of those, Eddie. Yep, just keep going. So as you can see here, though, if you don't know what incognito mode is, because I sure didn't, this will take you step by step. Okay, yeah, keep going. Now, this is fine. So as I said, you're going to go to the Cal Venues website to apply. This is also a website that has lots of useful information, but you'll scroll down and there'll be a place where it says apply. The first thing you're going to do when you get there is set up an account. Even if you already have applied for a grant through Lindustry, if you applied for the Cal Relief Grant or the Nonprofit Performing Arts Grant, you want to set up a new account. The programs are each separate and individual. You can use the same email address, but you do have to set up a new account. Next. And this is going to take you step by step through that. It's going to show you how to set up an account. The important thing here is you need to have a phone number that accepts texts that is the number that is tied with this account, because every time you go in to check your portal, which you will do afterwards to answer questions for Lindustry, check on your status and all of that, it's going to want to send you a text, and you have to have that text entered to confirm. So think carefully about the cell phone you're going to use, and make sure that you hold on to that cell phone at least for the next couple of months. If you do happen to lose it, or need to change things, you can contact Lindustry and have them help you get back in. But life will be much easier if you don't have to do that. Next. Okay, the first thing they're going to ask you for are the officer details. This is not the business. This is the person. The person that is the officer and or owner on the application has to be someone who is a signer on your statement of information. So if you're a large corporation and the owner is someone who is not involved in the day-to-day operation, and you're having, your director of finance is the one who usually does these kinds of paperwork, the owner or someone who is on that statement of information is who this has to be in terms of the officer. And at the end of the process, when you are signing the grant agreement to get the money, if you are selected, it has to be that person. So select carefully who this is. And this is the person, this officer is the one for whom that you want to submit that ID. So if you're the director of finance and you're not on the statement of information and you're helping prepare this, it's not your ID, it's this officer's ID. And all of these questions, including their social security number, is about that officer. The way these addresses work, they use a database that's a lookup, and some, for one, that will not take any PO boxes, and some residential addresses, the system just won't take. If it won't take the residential address, then use another officer's residential, or you can use the business address here, and you can confirm it once you finish, once you're submitted, they'll then ask you, and you can confirm the address at that point. Because unless you get it to accept an address, you cannot advance in the application. Okay, next. So now we're going to talk about the business. Sorry. So this is the legal name, the DBA. This is your EIN number. And again, the addresses. If you have a PO box, you need to use the physical address, not the PO box. Okay, those are all pretty straightforward. Next. This is more information about your business. All of the questions about jobs are not eligibility questions. Those are demographics only. Do not worry. If you say that it won't create jobs, you're not going to be declined. You don't have to know the exact on these. You don't have to worry about, well, what are you saying is a full-time and what are you saying is a part-time? Those are demographic questions. Answer them as best you can to what you believe about your organization. The primary use of the grant, there's drop downs there, and you can select those. The amount requested is 20% of your gross revenue from your 2019 taxes. And then minus a California relief grant if you got one. The annual gross receipts for 2019. This is your earned revenue off your 2019 taxes. Whether you're fiscal year or calendar year, it's the number off your taxes. Okay, next. Again, the only one of these that is an eligibility question is the NAICS code. The rest of them are demographic questions. Your NAICS code, there's a drop down there, and you're going to select the one that's there that matches what's on your taxes. Next. Now they're going to ask you the eligibility questions. This is where you're answering those eligibility pieces that we talked about before. And there's several of these. Go ahead. This is where you remember that, yes, you do in fact you do pay performers. If you're paying for the movie to play, you're paying for the performers. Okay, and then it's these questions should not all be auto declines. So for example, there's a question here about Major League Sports. Well, that doesn't apply to you. And so, you can just say no. Just answer them honestly and you should be fine. Next. Now, this is where the persona steps are in the application. Keep going. It's again, just going to show you these steps. Okay, now the other disturbing thing you have to give them is bank information for two reasons. One, the payments do not come out as checks. They are done as electronic transfers. So this is how you get paid. The other thing that is true is they use this again as part of their fraud prevention. There is a third-party vendor called Plaid, which connects to your bank account. Not all banks are found in Plaid. I bank at Montecito Bank and Trust, and it is not in Plaid. It is a small, more community bank. If your bank is not in the system, there is a way to move past this. That if it's not, send me an email and I can help you. You can call the call center and they can help you. Basically, what you're going to have to do is, if you search multiple times and your search fails to find the bank, then it should come up and give you a different option and ask you for different information. You're going to want not only your routing information and your bank account number, but for Plaid, it also is going to want the sign-in information for your online banking. So make sure that you have those materials for you. If you are not able to connect through Plaid, then you're going to have to provide your 2 most recent bank statements. So have those with you as PDFs, just in case you can't get through Plaid. Because again, you can't proceed to the end of the application until you get through Plaid. Next. Now they're going to ask you to upload your documents. Next. It's all pretty straightforward. Okay. You cannot go back. You can stop during the application, save and come back and continue. You can't go backwards in the application until you get to the very end. At the end, it'll give you a chance to review. And then you can, edit any of your answers if you're afraid you've made a mistake or changed something. Once you hit submit, you can't get back into the application without Lindustry opening it for you. So take a moment, make sure you've edited everything. The other thing that is true is you do not get a printout or a PDF of the full application. So if you want to keep a record of your answers, take screenshots as you go, or take screenshots at the end, because you will not get some sort of printout or copy of the full application. Next. And this is just telling you sort of what to expect afterwards. Next. Okay, as I said, you're going to get an initial application confirmation that your email got received. And then you can continue to check on the status. After February 1st, they'll start reviewing the individual applications. You will almost certainly get some contact from Lindustry. They may ask you questions. They may, sometimes the documents that you've uploaded, they will ask for again. There is evidently some sort of problem sometimes with things not fully. The end of the review process, they are going to need to connect on the phone to the signer. If your owner or board president or whoever's a signer is about to go on a 6-month European vacation where they are going to not have their cell phone and be in contact, don't use that person as your signer. Use someone else that's on your statement of information, because Lindustry has to speak on the phone directly to the person to once again confirm identity. That person also will need to do the DocuSign. Again, when you do the DocuSign for the grant at the end, if you are selected for a grant, you will not get a copy of that grant agreement. I don't know why. Most of us are used to, when we sign a DocuSign, you then get sent a copy. This system does not. I have been told that you can download it from your portal. I have never known anyone who could successfully do that. But if you want a copy of the agreement, make a PDF before you submit it and send it back. And if you want a copy of the signed agreement, you have to request that afterwards. Next. The biggest tip that I will tell you all is be careful about the email and the phone number. Make sure they are things that are monitored, because if Lindustry reaches out to you for a step, they will contact you a couple of times. They won't contact you 20 times. After 3 or 4 tries, if they haven't heard back from you, they'll decline your application, put it on hold. So if you're someone that doesn't check your email, if you're someone that doesn't listen to your voicemails or pick up strange numbers, this is a time to alter your behavior. Answer the phone, listen to your voicemails, check and make sure your voicemail box isn't full, because you want them to be able to reach you. Next. Okay, so this is the contact information. You will have all of this. I say to you again and again, please, if you have any questions, any problems, any issues, email me. I'm happy to help. My phone number is there also. I will tell you, I am much, much faster at responding by email than I am at phone for two reasons. One, I can answer emails while I'm in other meetings and also at 2 o'clock in the morning that I can't do with the phone. Also, if you give me the situation in the email, I can prepare an intelligent answer for you, and then you have a written copy of what I'm going to tell you to do. So email is a much better mode of communication for me than phone. But if you absolutely want to talk to me on phone, it's not that I'm not happy to talk to you. I'd just like to let people know that. Our next code 512100 and 713900 eligible. Yes and no. The 5121 is not, 713900 is. For eligibility on the next code, what you want to do is look at that list. Already applied and declared ineligible. How do I correct? Send me an email, John, and we can look into it together. I will see if I can find out what the problem was and whether it's something that we can be corrected. Particularly early on, there are sometimes some glitches and people sometimes don't understand the question that they're being asked. So send me an email to the grants manager email address, include, and this is true for everybody on the call, what I need in order to find out information about your application is I need the legal name of the business, the name of the owner or signer that you used, and the email that you used to apply. Shoot me an email, give me those details, tell me what your situation is, and I will do everything I can to help you get it sorted out. Do the events all have to be physically located in California? We're a musical performance promoter who's located, but the majority, 75% of your revenue has to be in the state of California. Oksana, send me an email because touring is a little weird. So let's talk. But you're a music festival promoter, not a tour. I'm sorry, I misread. So yeah, you're going to need to know that 75% of your income is in California. Is there a date range for expenses? No, Azriel, there is not a date range. It just, they have to be tied back to COVID. That's an excellent question, though. Most of these grants, like with SFOG, if anybody was in that program, you had a specific amount of time to spend the money and a specific time period when those expenses could come from. That is not the case with this grant. There is not a specific report to do at the end of the grant. You have to keep for 3 years a record of how you spend the money and a copy of the associated receipts and invoices. So from the day you spend your last dollar, you want to go for 3 years after that and keep a record of how you spent the money and be able to have backup for how you spent the money. There's not a formal process where you submit those, but you need to have them in case the state ever wants to come checking. Generated in California, reported in the California. As I said, Oksana, let's talk off online because you have some real specific issues here. Can this grant reimburse the company? Yes, you can count the already spent expenses towards this as long as you have not already counted those expenses towards PPP or SFOG or something. CDL officer required. And I think this was answers. It is the officer who is signing the grant that you need the California driver's license for. And that does not have to be the owner, but it does have to be someone who is listed as an officer on your statement of information filed with the Secretary of State. Can a representative of the company apply and submit their ID, or must it be? Okay, so we just covered that. It has to be a signer. I had started an application to one, but never submitted it or entered any documents. Even if you started an application, do not start another one. What you need to do is complete the first application. And if you, as you probably know, the percentage of loss is different now. In the first round, it was 70%. The legislature in the second round changed that to 30%. So you can go back and complete that first application. Shoot me an email and we can arrange to get the application reopened for you so you can complete it. What is income tax? I think what you're asking is if you're on a fiscal year instead of a calendar year. So what you want is what were your 2019 tax form. Check with your tax preparer and say, what's our fiscal, what is the tax return we submitted for 2019? And that's what you want to use. Yes, you are absolutely correct about the 512 not being listed. Unfortunately, 711-410 is not one of the eligible codes. In terms of will the IRS accept the code now under amended return, the electronic system will still not select that, will still not allow that code. You'll have to have the taxes hand prepared, or see if there's one of the other taxes, one of the other NAICS codes that fits your business that is eligible. But now, even in amending return, you're going to have the same problem. So you either have to have the amended return hand prepared, or see if there's one of the other eligible NAICS codes that describes your business. Now, you can't just randomly, if you're a barbershop, you can't just pick one of the eligible codes and say, okay, I'm going to apply, because you have to meet all the other criteria and those are going to be checked. So if you have applied with a NAICS code that isn't eligible because the IRS wouldn't accept it, then you want to look at the list and see if you do fall under one of the eligible codes, or have your taxes prepared by hand. We will need to pass an audit for the spending of the grant. No, there is not an audit on this as there is on the SFOG. There is, however, the state does have the right to come back and say, show us how you spent the money. So you do want to spend it correctly. You want to keep your receipts and your invoices, and you want to keep a record of how you spent the money. We only need to amend one. Yes, you only have to, of the 4 returns submitted, only one of them has to have the correct NAICS code. So you only have to amend one, either 2019 or 2020 of your state tax. I'm sorry, for your federal taxes. You do not have to amend all 4. I have round 2 and I'm wondering, anonymous attendee, if perhaps you have applied for 2 different programs. But email me, because if you have both a round 1 and a round 2, you don't, and you don't know yet whether you qualify. I mean, you don't know whether you qualify or not, because we're not to the end of that process. So email me if you have in fact done both, so we can get one of them closed out, because otherwise when they go to close you out and try to move you on through the process, you're going to run into trouble. Because the application, and also if you're saying the applications look different, that also gives me a red flag that you may have some, you may be confused, because it's basically the same application. My return says 2018 to 19 to check with your tax preparer, because that's because you're on a fiscal year. Check with your tax preparer and say, which one of these is 2019? For most people, their fiscal year is the year that it ends in. Some people go by the one that it begins with, but for most, if you say it's 2018 to 2019, that's the 2019 fiscal year. But as I say, check with your tax preparer. When any current loss and recovery, as long as the expense is COVID related, then it's an eligible expense. is a board resolution required in order to be eligible? No. A board resolution is not required to be eligible. There is mention of board resolution. That is only if for some reason you started with a signer who now is unavailable. You know, some people had some, and particularly in round one, it took almost a year for some of these applications to be processed. And so some people had someone start the application who then died or retired or was no longer with the business. And in that case, a board resolution is required to say, we started out with this person, and now we have this other person. Or if you've had a change in who your signers are, and the person that was a signer is no longer on your statement of information, so you want to substitute in a new signer. But no, just for the normal application, a board resolution is not required. Well, we're over by 2 minutes, but I think we've gotten through all the questions. Are there any other questions?
Terry, I'm going to throw just a couple at you.
Perfect.
One of the, with the earned revenue, the way the question is worded, it was ticket sales. And for theaters, it's all revenue, right? We're not just looking at ticket sales.
Right. And the question should say ticket sales, concessions,
right,
merchandise, food sold at events, merchandise. It's all of that. What they don't want is, and this is less of an example for this crowd, but if, for example, you're a studio and you have classes and tuition is a huge part of your income, and then you do 4 or 5 performances during the year. Well, if tuition is 90% of your revenue, then you're not going to qualify, because clearly that is or a restaurant that the food and beverage is 90% of what you do, and 2 times a year you do a show. You're not going to be eligible. But for you, any income that is related to your event counts.
Right. Okay. And is it safe to say Plaid is really just looking to verify that there's activity in this bank account, that it wasn't created overnight?
Yes.
It's a fraud protection tool.
Yes, exactly. And thank you for expanding on that. You and I talked about that, and I forgot today. Yes, they're not trying to take your money. What they're wanting to do is look in and make sure that income is coming in and going out, and that this is an actual working account. And it is not the people at Lindustry. It is a certified third party. This is what they do. This is their job. And it is 100% fraud prevention. That's why they're doing it.
And on that same note, tax returns, really that's just a fraud prevention tool also. The financial statements are really what matters here, that the tax return is just a fraud prevention tool.
Well, the tax return is a fraud prevention, and also that's what your award is based on. Your award is not based on the P&Ls that you will provide, because the P&Ls are not a full year. Those are the individual categories. So the tax return is so that the government has something they can verify in terms of that you're requesting the correct amount.
Mm-hmm.
Because if they're going to say it's 20% of your 2019 earned income, and they don't have a way to verify that, then we'd all probably have really large income in 2019. Right. So the reason that they have you submit your tax form, and the reason it's based on that, is because that's something they can go to the IRS and request a copy. They can go to the Franchise Tax Board and request a copy and make sure this is the income that you reported in 2020 about your 2019. It's not just a number or that you've come up with.
Got it.
So yeah, that is more fraud prevention, and that's the basis for your award. Okay. Anything else?
Well, I see some open questions here, but I think almost all of
May 19 revenue qualified for ticket sales, and I had to pivot to I go ahead and send me a note, anonymous attendee, but all of the revenue even if you pivoted to do something else, if the something else is not related to events, then it doesn't count. So if you don't have a loss, unfortunately, if in 2020 you had a lot of earned income because you started doing something new and different, then you still didn't have a loss. So that is going to be an issue for you. But go ahead and send me your situation and we can talk offline. In 2 different accounts, one for income and one for outgo. Should put down your main banking account. It will only accept one account. So if you have like a savings account versus a checking account, use the checking account, because they're going to want to see that activity. But then I would also, there's a place for other documents. And if you literally have 2 completely separate accounts, then I would include a note to explain that under one of the other documents, or where it allows you to update a bank statement, because I do not believe the Plaid system is going to let you use both accounts. John, a copy of the webinar will be available on the Californians for the Arts website, and you will get an email with a link to that. You will also get this slideshow is also on the website, as will the Q&A be, and the Q&A from previous webinars is there. We're 7 minutes over. I'm happy to stay if anyone has any other questions, but I want to pause and say thank you for coming. I know this application is particularly strange for those of you in this particular industry. So if you have questions, concerns, please don't hesitate. The other thing that I will tell you is if you call the call center and get information that confuses or concerns you, shoot me an email and confirm it. Everybody at Lindustry is great and wonderful, and they're all trying very hard to help you through the process. As with all organizations, there's a lot of information. And as you can see, there's a lot of information in this program. They're running multiple grant programs, and things sometimes change as we go through the process. And some of the call center people sometimes get behind. So if you call and ask a question about amended tax returns, and they tell you, oh, you can't do that, or if you get anything that just seems off to you, shoot me an email and I can help you get to the bottom of it. All right. I think we've hit a lull. Todd, anything else you want to add?
No, you're a machine. Thank you.
I do apologize for the sort of rapid fire approach. I just know there's a whole lot of information and I'd rather get it all out there for you. But you got my email. Feel free to shoot me any questions. Good luck. It's really not an overwhelming process. It just seems like one. If you prepare yourself and get your documents ready, the process on the computer should take you 20 minutes, 30 at the max, if your bank account decides to misbehave. Don't be overwhelmed. If you are on the fence and you think, yeah, I probably qualify, but maybe not, apply and let them figure it out. Lindustry will tell you they would always rather you err on the side of applying. The same is true, as I said, about getting your application in. They can help you fix if you make a mistake in your application. But once that portal closes, it closes, and they are not allowed to accept any more applications. So be sure you get started. All right. Have a great day. Good luck. I look forward to hearing a lot of success stories so that you guys can get some support, because we all know this mess isn't over yet and things are still very hard. And we hope that you are able to access these funds and help you with your recovery. Thanks, everybody.
Terry.
Bye.